So a couple of people joined us in the last couple of minutes. So what I was, well, first off, let me introduce myself. I'm Kevin Harris. I head up finance and operations for RunSignup. And this is Sue Lindeboom. Sue is our finance manager. And so I was just joking downstairs that if anyone asks a question that's more complicated than where is the financial reporting, I'm going to turn and look at Sue. But please, as we go through this, feel free to stop me. I'll probably repeat your question. We record all these sessions and use them again for training purposes or use them again to put on our site so that people can see the same type of information. So I will probably repeat your question, or at the end, we'll also have time for questions and we'll do that on the microphone as well. So if I can get the clicker to work. Here we go. We're going to talk about financial summary and the drill down on each of the different pieces of that. And then we have a separate section in here to talk about some of the payment account reports. There are a lot of payment account reports in the system, so we probably won't get all of them. But if we don't get to one of your favorite reports that you have a question on, feel free to bring that up and we can either talk to you about it during the session or talk to you about it after the session. So this is the financial summary report, and you've probably seen this on your dashboard. This is the main graphic that comes up when you're looking at your overall race, and we're going to drill down into each of the individual pieces with that. Probably a good idea because that is not the clearest image there. So we'll get to a little bit clearer image on the next one. So this is the financial summary, and this is the overall summary for your race. It's got transactions up at the top, and then some of the different places are transaction processing fees, sales tax, directly paid charity donations, refunds, holdbacks. And I'm just kind of going through this quickly because we're going to have a slide on each one of these different areas and talk about specifically what's in each one. But this is the main place or the main graphic that you see when you first come on to the financial summary part of the dashboard. So the first one, overall transactions, sales tax, charities, et cetera. So transactions is just that. It's all of the transactions for your race. Total amounts that are charged to customers in real time. They may have not even completely settled with the credit card company yet, but if they've been captured through the RunSignup system, they're going to show on your financial summary dashboard. Later on, we're going to have places where you can see what that's settled and what we think the payment is going to be to you. But this is basically all the transactions that have gone through your system. There is that feature in our system where a transaction can be canceled within 15 minutes. You've probably seen that if you've ever registered for one of your events. So potentially these numbers could go down relative to that, but most people don't use that function, but that is available and that can change that overall transaction amount. The transaction processing fees, those are the processing fees that RunSignup charges to process that transaction. Some races and some timers increment that. They put an additional processing fee on top of that. So that's seen in that particular area as well. And then sales tax is also part of that as well. So any sales tax that's collected and then further remitted on your behalf is part of all that overall transaction total that you see as well. And then any directly paid charity donations, so donations to a charity that have their own payment account, those are actually outside of this transaction summary. Is that right, Sue?
They're included in your total transactions.
Oh, total transactions.
But they won't show up in any of your payments.
Gotcha.
Be aware that these are clickable. Most people are at this point if you've used this for a while, but not everybody. This is a great way if you want to drill down into what you're getting, you know, what's there. I've had to tell people about them sometimes. So
the blue ones are clickable. This is a total of any refunds. So any refunds, any refunded funds that are initiated by you, automated refunds like referral rewards will also show up in this area as well. And then transaction processing fees, RunSignup processing fees, and any from the timer or race operator, and then refund of processing fees as well.
So this is going to go away. We no longer charge processing. We no longer charge a fee to refund. So this is pretty much always zero. But so this number will include any fees that you are refunding. which may be charged to the race or not, all depending on who paid, you know. So if you're refunding the transaction fees that the customer paid, that comes out of the race because we don't refund that. You have to choose whether you're going to refund it.
So that makes sense.
Does
So
that make sense?
yeah, so basically RunSignup charges a processing fee to process the transaction. If you ever decide to refund your participants, generally what you're refunding is the amount of money that you collected on that transaction. The RunSignup processing fee, we incurred costs to process that transaction. So we leave our processing fee in place. If you decide that you want to also refund that back to the participant, then you have to add funds to be able to come up with that processing fee part of it. And we've seen races handle it both ways. And, you know, participants, you know, generally, I think, understand if they receive just the registration proceeds back from that. But we've also seen races where they want to give the whole amount of money back. And then that requires a little bit of an addition for the processing fee portion of it. So this area is for holdbacks. So we know this is a very popular area with races, holdbacks. Just kidding. So this is something that we kind of put in an automated fashion around 2020 because of COVID and because of, quite honestly, the nervousness that we had as a company. We had collected something like $75 million worth of transactions for races that had not occurred and weren't going to occur. And so that potentially can become a liability for RunSignup. So if we pay that money out to a race and then there are chargebacks against that race, and then the race doesn't put that money back into RunSignup, back into their account, then those chargebacks fall on RunSignup. And so we put this holdback in place at that time, and it actually was a higher amount of money because we wanted to try to make sure that there were funds available to do these potential chargebacks that might come up. We had a really incredibly good experience with the races that we work with. Really lots of responsible race directors. We created some tools where they could go out to participants and say, do you want a refund? Do you want to defer your registration? Do you want to donate your registration? And many event organizers use those tools to figure out what to do about their races. We probably got something like $20 or $25 million back from races to be used for refunds. And the rest of registrations were, the rest of those dollars were either donated to a charitable cause or deferred for another race registration. So it really turned out to be kind of a win-win for everybody. Events managed their participants very well. We didn't end up having a large chargeback exposure, maybe about $25,000 in total that we funded for races that went out of business or weren't able to put money back. And so from that, we lowered that refund reserve down to something that's more of a normal type of fund that you might use for refunds in your race or maybe for chargebacks for your race. We get very few chargebacks, but races do periodically do refunds, either because they have a policy or because they have a squeaky wheel or whatever. But we think that 2.5% is kind of a more normal amount of money just to hold for that type of exposure. And then that money, after your race completes, as long as you don't have any chargebacks, that money pays out the week after your race completes. If you happen to have chargebacks, the system looks for when was your last chargeback and puts you out 21 days from that, thinking that if you had one or you had two, you might get another one. But once again, it tends to be a fairly small thing for us as a company, but it will look for when your last chargeback was and then pay you out after that.
It's looking at the chargeback per event, right? Not
Correct.
as company as a whole.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, per event. Yep.
And then I'll just mention that this report, there's two different reports that link from here, which are helpful. This is the holdback report, which actually shows you the in and the out, every deposit to a holdback and every payment out from the holdback. And I encourage races to think of the holdback account as like a sweep account. So basically what happens is we sweep money into this holdback account, and that's really an accounts payable for you. We owe you that money. And then it doesn't show up in your financial summary though. It shows as a negative, right? So you need to keep track of that, and it confuses a lot of people. And then when a refund is actually issued, the funds are swept back into the race, and then the refund is issued from the race. So that can cause this report to be a little confusing when people don't understand that. And then this links actually to the reserve page, which lets you see your current balance, your required balance, and that kind of stuff. It also lets you do things like set additional holdback if you think you need that in your race.
Okay, this is more on holdback. So what your reserve may not be exactly 2.5%. That's the number that we're going for, but because it's off of transactions, it can be a little bit different than that. Only settled transactions are included. Refund reserve transfers are done hourly on new transactions that are settled. And you can also manage your own reserve. You can add money to your refund reserve if you know that you're going to be doing, say, a mass refund for a particular event. Okay, so this is another section on the report that's also clickable, and financial adjustments or any financial charge outside of the regular registration and management functions like chargebacks, check fees, or the manual movement of funds will show up in this adjustment section of your financial summary transaction summary. And then this is a look at what some of those adjustments might look like within that section if you click in on it. So that can include chargebacks, also reverse chargebacks if we win a chargeback on your behalf, and that's something that Sue does a lot of work to try to reverse those chargebacks whenever possible. Additions to the refund reserve, funds move from one race to another, or a check payment fee. So check payment fee, hopefully everyone here gets paid by ACH. That's really the way that we would prefer to pay you, and there's no cost for that. A couple of years ago, I guess it's been maybe a couple of years ago, we added a check payment fee. We use an outside service called bill.com. They write a check, they mail a check, and all that has fees associated with it. We would much prefer to pay you by ACH. It's a much more secure way for you to get your money, happens faster, and it's also free. So if you're not set up that way and you're getting checks today, go in and update your payment account to make sure you're getting paid by ACH. And then this, Sue mentioned a minute ago, this is the overall financial summary. So a net amount that's owed to the race, payments that you've received already, and then the balance owed. And the point that Sue was making is that the holdback amount is additional to that. So you would still be receiving that in addition to what this would reflect that's owed to you at this point in time. Because at this point in time, when you looked at this report, the holdback is not owed to you. And once you've cleared the end of the race and you don't have any chargebacks, then that amount of money becomes owed to you at that point in time. Okay, and then this, I guess there's a little bit of additional information on here. So this detailed summary, this shows this is if you click down further on that detailed summary on that same page, this shows information in a little bit different fashion. Shows the race fees, which are your registration fees paid, registrations with add-ons and those add-on purchases, any registration coupons that are used against those registrations or to reduce the cost of those registrations, any transfer credits, donations that are collected and paid to the race, and then donations that are directly paid to charities are shown as a separate line item on there. So that's an additional part of the transaction summary that's a little bit further down on that page.
Yeah, so the thing that confuses people sometimes on here is that this race fee number is basically, if I understand it correctly, my understanding is that it's basically the cost of the registration at the time that the transaction happened. And then from that, they deduct your coupons or any special costs that they had. So that's why that number might seem funny to people, and you can click into that race fees number and you can see the transactions, and hopefully that it clears it up. But this report is very useful for some races, but it can cause confusion too to some people.
Why does the
Oh,
I'm probably really loud. Why does the number change from 544 to 487? In parentheses.
Okay, so the 544 is the total number of transactions that have been processed.
So like the number of registrants?
So this is what's been
Could be
collected.
registrants, could be people who bought something. and then paid to race. So this is, the second column is what's already been paid.
So this minus.
So that's a
this equals
smaller
this.
number.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, so
So
this
you're
part is
still
still what's left owed to you.
making a check.
You're still expecting funds, yes.
And this,
Yes.
and this number, if everything is working correctly, should be the same number as what was on the previous screen. so-
Right.
Oh, yeah, it is. Perfect.
Right, so the paid to race column ties out to your detailed payment summary reports. And I've noticed then after the race,
It goes away.
then we have that owed to race, right?
Yeah,
So that's how I'm trying to figure out, like, when I'm reconciling after an event closes,
right.
everything ties to the payment reports, then I have this adjustment to
It's
the end.
confusing. And if you can go back, Kevin. So like, see right here where it says owed to race and then payments and then balance owed, this should really be current balance owed. And then this goes away.
Right.
And
becomes
I've
zero.
actually put
right.
in a request to change the way this shows, because after the race, the payments goes away too. Like you just lose so much information after the race is over currently. So I do have a request into engineering, and once it makes it up the list, hopefully we are going to reorganize this. I'm hoping that we'll actually show we're going to have the holdback maybe up there as a negative, but maybe add it back in at the bottom also, so that you realize that you're owed that money, because that can cause racist confusion. And then also just leave a lot of this detail in after the race closes, because it is, I go into a race and I'm like, what happened here? Because you can't tell. Then you have to go to different reports to find all that information. And it's definitely not ideal. So it's on the list of things to be updated.
Okay.
Maybe this year. You never know.
Bob did say yesterday at a session that we had yesterday that we had some financial reporting updates on our roadmap to be completed. So hopefully this is one of them. All right, and that takes us over to payment account reports.
Yeah,
So do you want the clicker or you want me to click for you?
either way. You go ahead. You're doing such a good job. Okay. So one of the things, this estimated next payment, it's a great tool. It was kind of written as somebody probably asked for it and we wrote it. I actually had them take it away for check payment races because it was hardly ever accurate. At least I think it's gone. But so basically what it will tell you is how much you haven't been paid that's pretty much settled. So it's going to be an estimate of what you would be paid if you were paid right this minute. So a lot of race directors watch this like a hawk, and then if something changes at the end and they don't get that amount, they're not happy. So, but most of the time you get something close to that amount.
Yeah, so that was from a lot of requests from people. There wasn't visibility on, hey, when's my next payment coming and how much is it going to be? And because we use a back end company that does credit card processing for us, we can't always tell at that second what it's going to settle by the end of the day. And the end of the day is usually around 8 o'clock Eastern time. And then so that's kind of what the normal end of the day is, but your end of the day on your dashboard goes all the way through midnight. And so this is trying to estimate what's actually going to settle and be available for payment. And it isn't always perfect. It's usually, as Sue mentioned, kind of around what it's going to be. The timing is usually right of when it's going to come out. But then what happens is after 8 o'clock, the next morning comes, we get a report that comes from the processing company that tells us everything that's settled. And then we can force out what's available to be paid after that. And that happens really over a 7-day period of time. Most customers get paid weekly. So that process is happening. Really, they kind of skip it for the weekends and it kind of catches up on Monday. But that's a process that's happening, for over those 7 days. And we're trying to calculate what your next payment is relative to what's settled.
I'm looking to see what I'm looking at. Hide inoperative past races. Okay, so this is going to be your payment account page. And below here, you can't really see it, is a list of all your races. And you have the option here to hide races that aren't active. Can you save that? I'm not sure. I'm sorry to say. You can set a date what that date shows you is it's not going to show you what you would be owed for a particular date. It shows you races that are active during that date subset. So, because I have people who call me up and they want to know like what they were owed on this date. And I actually tried myself to use this and it doesn't work for that purpose. So you can use this if you want to try to cut down how much information you're seeing. And here you have, it'll tell you what type of event it is and the status, whether it's operating, deleted, draft. Again, my impression is that you have to go in and click it every time, right?
Yeah,
Okay, I'll put it on a list. Right. Just permanently delete. Yeah. Or, I mean, make it that you have to actually go in and request to see them if you want to see them. Yeah, I'll put in that's a good request.
Yeah.
And that shouldn't take too long. So your current reserve, this is kind of showing you for each race what your current reserve is and whether it's at the current requirement. So most races are going to show up as at the current race. When we first set up this concept of a reserve, it was more of a mess because we weren't collecting the money as it came in so much. So, but now as we're collecting the money as it come in, for the most part, these are going to be right. You're going to be at your current required reserve and everything's going to flow properly. Oh, so they set the date that you're likely to have I might be the last day of the race. What are they showing on this report? I don't even know. This is when
the time that, like, if I don't want any payments until my event's over, and
That's-
we can only hold it so many days to give this, and that's my.
you can set that, but not here. This is basically, we're still on the main payment account page. And basically it's showing you what your required reserve is. And so this is the required pre-race reserve. And for some reason, this race is higher. And then this is the required payment account reserve overall. So basically what we do is we have a rate per race reserve. And then we also have an overall account reserve requirement, which is half. So basically, if one of your races is really short on reserve funds, you may have more withheld in a different race to make up for that. So they apply that there and it'll show up at the bottom better here. So you can see if you have any red marks where, oh, this race is short and that's why this race is having more withheld. And it won't actually withhold more in the race. I think it'll just prevent payments. It'll just reduce the amount you're paid. But that hold setting that you're talking about is on the settings page. Under here, it's a tab. Yeah. And you can set whatever date you want to when you would release your payments, or you can set a hold until date, or you can set a only release this much date. And then you can hold like a certain amount when it, only pay when it goes above this amount. Those aren't commonly used, but some races use them. So then this shows what's actually going to be payable for that race and for so it's basically just a breakdown of that same report. And if you get to the bottom, that number at the bottom should pretty much match up to what you're seeing in your estimated next payment. This is the total of your recent payments. This is also on that same report. So on the report on the far right, it shows your most recent payment and whether you've had any chargebacks and what the last date of your last chargeback was in that race. That's mostly relevant if you have a race that has more than either 3 chargebacks for a smaller race or 1% for a bigger race, then it will actually prevent payment from your payment account or release of your holdback, excuse me. And again, we're back to the estimated next payment. These have been pretty accurate of late. It shows you what's settled and what's not. So that kind of gives you an estimate. The one issue is when we get a lot of calls because this number keeps moving. Like I have this number, but now it's 2 weeks later. That's a problem and people should call in or email in about that. Because basically what that means is there's some issue with the account that's preventing payment. And we can look into it and tell you what that issue is or fix it hopefully. And then we can push out a payment, assuming it's nothing, critical. But that will sometimes happen if someone doesn't realize they still have a hold set somewhere. If, one of the things that I became aware of recently is that when COVID happened, we added a hold in the payment, in the holdback. When you add funds to the reserve to issue refunds, we set an automatic 3-week hold there. So there's a number like $30,000, let's say, and then there's a date next to it. Well, that date does tell you what 3 weeks is, but when 3 weeks is up, it doesn't release that money automatically. And when your race renews, most of the time that money just gets used up issuing refunds. But when your race renews, that money, that number carries forward. So now you're in your next race and you're not getting paid and you're not getting paid, and that can be why. And that's also getting fixed. That's actually right on an engineer's plate right now. So that should be fixed shortly.
How does it fix it?
Well, what we're gonna fix is I'm not exactly sure what the plan is, because we still want people to have the option to hold additional money in their race. But we need to set a real date that you can say, I want to hold an extra $1,000 in my race. And then when that date gets hit, the money gets released and that date gets cleared. So that it's not carrying forward and causing problems.
Races we open week after the event takes place to get the momentum, and we'll get 100 or 200 people register 3 days after.
Right.
The event took place this year. Then the holdback gets all screwed up, and
Right. Now that's kind of a different issue because
money gets thrown into next year.
yeah, and that was a big issue after COVID when we had like a 3-4 week hold. We had a lot of races that were struggling with that. It's definitely better because now we release after a week after the Tuesday after the race, we release the money. So races that can wait till the Tuesday after, they're okay. But I agree. I know that races want to have the option to open up right away.
But I think you're talking about the holdback on the previous race carries over to the new race. Is that right?
Well, that's what I was talking about, but I think yeah, it's been a problem.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of an umbrella concept over your races, which is your payment account. So it's really analogous to your bank account, right? So this money is sitting in your bank account and you can still theoretically do your accounting for it. It's a receivable. It's money that's owed to you. And that money is still owed to that race, still revenue to that first race, even though there's a holdback that's gotten moved over to the second race. Now, what Sue's talking about is we have an engineering fix in place to, I guess, make that not automatically roll over to that other race.
No, unfortunately, this is a different issue. This is just if you have an additional hold on the holdback page. In other words, if you go in and you type, I want to hold an extra $1,000, that can roll over to the new race without people being aware.
Oh, I got you.
But
So
what
this is just
he's
money
talking
owed to
about
the race.
is still an active problem.
Yeah.
I've brought it up. I don't know what they're thinking of in terms of a fix. I think the project that one of our engineers is working on is this whole new report. And I think once that project is finished, they're hoping to use that to manage this issue, but I'm not exactly sure how it will work.
Question. I think we tried that. There's only 2 people in my office, so I don't have time to reconcile and call and email. And so we tried to trick it, and I think it worked. We created another payment account type under our same EIN. So we had like Farm to Fork Rider Run 21 and Farm to Fork Rider Run 22. So we could immediately open ticket sales, but we didn't have that confusion of what's old and what's new. It was totally separate and easy to reconcile.
Well, some races do that by creating a separate race,
Okay.
but that's not ideal because then you have to take all the registrations from that race and move it over in order
Yeah,
to keep
she's
your
just
history.
She's just talking about a second.
Yeah, she created a separate payment account. That's just to keep the money
Also-
separate. Yeah,
Also not best practice, but I
Yeah.
can see how it could work.
yeah, right. Yeah,
Races.
Okay.
I have a current server.
I'd have to look at the race and I'm happy to do that. Because sometimes it doesn't get released properly. When did the race take place? Yeah, you're in exactly. We had an issue. We changed the holdback from the 4 weeks to the 1 week. And there were some races stuck in the middle that didn't get released properly. And most of those we cleared out because people reached out and asked us like, why is this money still there? And then we would release it. But that was sort of a unfortunate bug.
We can take a look at that when we're done. See if we can figure out how to release it for you.
Yeah, so in this report, they're basically showing you how you can download specific items from the report. So you have your total transaction amount over there, and then you can download by clicking these links, the store items and the add-ons that are included. And the same thing with refunds. So they're just showing you that you have those options to download more reports there on these reports. I don't know how common this is to be used, but we do offer an option for people who want to be able to download accounting codes directly with their data, that you would put that in there. So it would basically tell you that for this event, we want to use this code. And it's just a way for people, once they download the data, they can sort on certain codes and it makes it a little easier for them to do their reporting. Okay.
Right. Any more questions? No? Okay. Thank you. Appreciate you coming.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer anything offline if people have those.
Sounds like we've got a race to debug soon.